This is a May Luna Media production.
There is something deeply fascinating to me about the fact that modern humans will roll their eyes at ritual while simultaneously clutching their emotional support iced coffee, scrolling TikTok for 4 straight hours to self-soothe, need white noise to sleep, and take melatonin gummies like bedtime communion wafers, and maybe even drinking every Friday night because I just need to decompress. Like, babe, those are rituals too. We never stopped being ritualistic creatures. We just industrialized the process and then disconnected it from meaning. And you know what? I think somewhere along the way, modern society started treating ceremony like it was primitive, like our ancestors were just dancing around fires for vibes, as if they were somehow less intelligent than us because they didn't have iPhones and standing desks and nervous system coaches on Instagram telling us to take a fucking breath. Meanwhile, anxiety disorders are through the roof and everybody's fucking cortisol is cooked and we're spiritually numb and chronically overstimulated, and half the population can't sit alone in silence for more than 30 seconds without immediately reaching for a screen. So maybe, just maybe, the ancestors were onto something. Because when you really start studying ancient ritual through the lens of neuroscience and biology and psychology and consciousness studies, you realize something absolutely wild. Like, ceremony was the original nervous system regulation. Like drumming and chanting and fasting and dancing and breathwork and sensory deprivation and prayer and plant medicine and sweat lodges and pilgrimage and moon rituals and these grief ceremonies, they weren't random spiritual hobbies. These were technologies designed to intentionally alter human consciousness. Like, your ancestors engineered altered states on purpose. And you know what, honestly, science is finally catching up to explain why they worked. Like, we now know that rhythmic drumming can shift brainwave states, and breath work changes carbon dioxide and oxygen balance in the body and directly impacts the nervous system. And chanting stimulates the vagus nerve. Fasting increases neuroplasticity and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Like, psychedelics reduce activity in the default mode network, which is the part of the brain associated with ego rigidity and identity fixation. Like, collective ritual increases oxytocin bonding and, you know what, basically your emotional regulation. So in other words, ancient humans understood something that modern culture forgot, and it's that the human nervous system was never meant to stay trapped in one state all the time. Like, we were designed to move between the worlds, between stillness and ecstasy, between grief and celebration, between silence and song, and between logic and mystery. And you know what? Maybe that's why modern life feels so spiritually dehydrating. Because we replaced sacred ritual with algorithms. We traded ceremony for consumption. We lost the map for how to intentionally enter altered states. And now people are unconsciously trying to escape themselves through burnout and addiction and doom scrolling and overworking and chaos and distraction instead. So, you know what? Today we're diving into the lost science of ceremony, the biology of ritual, the neuroscience of altered states, and why your ancestors may have understood the human mind and body and spirit better than modern capitalism ever will. Welcome to the Synaptic Soul podcast, where science meets spirit and they totally make out. I'm Ava Marie Anderson, your quantum-loving, spiritually savage bestie, here to prove your energy isn't mystical, it is measurable. And oh, quick heads up, if you hear snoring or grunting or a dramatic sigh mid-download, that is not a ghost in the machine. It's just my Frenchie co-hosts, Rocky and Rambo, vibing at their own frequency. Let's dive in. One of the greatest lies that modern culture ever sold us on is that the healthiest human being is the one who remains emotionally and psychologically consistent at all times. Like calm and productive and focused and efficient and stable, linear and predictable. The ideal modern human is basically expected to function like a machine, to perform on command and suppress emotional fluctuation and override exhaustion and ignore intuition and maintain maintain that exact level of input and output regardless of the season and the grief and the hormonal cycle or the stress level or the spiritual crisis or the existential unraveling. And biologically, that is absolutely fucking insane, because humans were never designed to exist in one fixed state of consciousness all the time. Like, your nervous system was built for rhythm. It's cycles, it's expansion and contraction and activation and recovery, and even your heart does this, and your lungs do this, and the tide does this, and the moon does this. The fucking seasons do this. The universe itself operates in oscillation. Its frequency and pulsation and movement. Like, nothing in nature remains static except dead things. And the ancient cultures understood this intuitively. This is why ceremony existed in nearly every civilization across human history. Like, ritual was never separate from survival because humans recognized that psychological health required intentional transitions between the states of being. Like, there were rituals for birth and death and grief and war and harvest and marriage and menstruation, hunting, adulthood, healing, dreaming, and just fucking spiritual communion, because ancient people understood something that we forgot. The psyche needs portals. The nervous system needs thresholds. Humans need symbolic transitions in order to metabolize change. Like, modern society stripped most of this away. And now we go to work the next day after trauma, and we answer the emails while grieving, and we scroll through social media while dissociating. We suppress the emotional cycles with caffeine and productivity culture and artificial stimulation while everybody feels numb and anxious and exhausted and just disconnected from meaning. And biologically, this makes perfect sense. Like, your autonomic nervous system, that system responsible for regulating stress and survival and safety, was never meant to remain locked in chronic sympathetic activation. And sympathetic activation is your fight or flight state. It's incredibly useful if you're escaping danger. Like, it floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline and increases the heart rate and sharpens the focus and prepares the body for immediate action. The problem is that modern humans are activating the system constantly. Not because we're being chased by predators, but because we're being chased by notifications and deadlines and financial stress and social comparison and information overload and fucking perpetual uncertainty. Like, your nervous system doesn't actually know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a Slack notification from your boss at 9:47 p.m. Like, stress is stress to the body. And when the sympathetic activation becomes chronic, the body starts breaking down. Your sleep suffers, and your digestion suffers, and your hormones suffer. Your emotional regulation suffers. Your immune function drops, and inflammation increases, and the brain becomes hypervigilant. Like, anxiety becomes normalized. We become addicted to stimulation because our nervous systems literally forgot how to rest. And this is where ancient ritual becomes incredibly fascinating through the lens of modern neuroscience. Like, ceremony often intentionally guided people out of chronic survival states and into parasympathetic states, the rest and digest and restore branch of the nervous system. Like, chanting regulates breaths and stimulates the vagus nerve. Rhythmic drumming, which is why I love rap music so much, it synchronizes neural firing patterns. Group singing increases oxytocin and social bonding, and dancing discharges stored stress hormones through movement. Like, communal grieving prevents emotional suppression from calcifying into trauma. Like, prayer and meditation shift the brain into alpha and theta wave states associated with restoration and creativity and healing. Like, your ancestors may not have used the language of polyvagal theory, but they absolutely understood the lived experience of nervous system regulation. And honestly, I think modern humans underestimate how sophisticated ancient consciousness practices actually were. Like, we tend to look at ancient ritual through this weirdly arrogant modern lens that assumes that technological advancement automatically equals psychological advancement. But just because we have smartphones doesn't mean that we understand consciousness better than people who spent thousands of years studying altered states directly through embodied experience. Because here's the wild thing. Ancient humans intentionally created environments that shifted brain states. Like, think about it. You had your dark caves and your firelight and your fasting and drumming and chanting and isolation and breath manipulation and psychoactive plants and a pilgrimage or cold exposure or sensory deprivation. That's literally nervous system engineering. And modern neuroscience now confirms that these experiences profoundly affect brainwave activity. It affects your neurotransmitter production, your emotional processing, and your neuroplasticity. Like, the brain itself operates through electrical oscillations, so measurable frequencies associated with different states of consciousness. High beta waves are associated with stress and vigilance and active problem solving. Alpha states are calmer and more reflective. Theta states are deeply meditative or dreamlike and intuitive and often associated with creativity or memory processing and spiritual experiences. Like, modern humans spend just a completely absurd amount of time trapped in high beta stress states. But ancient rituals intentionally moved people into alpha and theta, and that distinction matters because, look, healing rarely happens in survival mode. You can't access your intuition while your nervous system thinks you're under attack. You can't process grief when you're chronically overstimulated. You can't hear your inner world over constant noise. And I think deep down, a lot of people can feel this. This is why silence feels like uncomfortable now, and stillness feels threatening, and rest feels unproductive. Like, people literally panic when they're left alone with their own thoughts because modern life has trained the nervous system to equate stimulation with safety. But your ancestors understood something sacred. Altered states were not an escape from reality. They were a return to a deeper reality. Like, ceremony created space for humans to reconnect with themselves and each other and nature and spirit and grief and purpose and awe and mystery. Like, ritual interrupted ordinary consciousness long enough for transformation to occur. And psychologically, that interruption matters because identity itself becomes more flexible in altered states. Like, that rigid ego softens and pattern recognition increases and emotion surfaces and symbolism becomes more accessible. Like, healing becomes possible, which honestly makes me wonder if the real crisis of modern humanity isn't that we've become less spiritual, but maybe we've just become trapped in one conscious state for just so fucking too far long. If you really think about it, one of the strangest things about being human is that sound can completely alter your state of consciousness. Like, a song can make you cry, or a frequency can make your skin tingle, or a crowd chanting in unison can make you feel like you have temporarily dissolved into something larger than yourself. Drums can make your heartbeat change. Breath can make your vision blur. Repetition can pull the mind into trance. And ancient humans knew this long before neuroscience had fancy machines to measure what was happening inside of the brain. And this is what makes ritual so fascinating from both a spiritual and a scientific perspective. Like, our ancestors discovered that rhythm changes consciousness, not metaphorically, but literally. Like, the human brain operates through electrical activity. Like, neurons communicate through electrochemical signaling, producing rhythmic patterns known as your brain waves. And then those different brainwave frequencies are associated with different states of awareness. So high beta waves are linked to stress and concentration and hypervigilance, and alpha waves emerge during relaxed wakefulness and meditation. And theta waves are associated with dreams and deep meditation and intuition and creativity and memory processing and even those trance states. Gamma waves are linked to heightened awareness and integration and moments of profound insight. And here's where things start getting deliciously weird. Like, rhythmic stimulation can influence those frequencies, and this process is called entrainment. So In physics, entrainment occurs when two oscillating systems begin synchronizing with each other. And you see it in pendulum clocks or fireflies blinking together or groups unconsciously matching a walking pace. And even women's menstrual cycles sometimes sync when they're close friends or living together for long periods. Like biological systems naturally seek synchronization. The nervous system loves a rhythm, which means when ancient humans used repetitive drumming and chanting and rattling and clapping and dancing, or even just the fucking breath patterns during ceremony, they were essentially using external rhythm to influence internal neurological states. Your ancestors accidentally became consciousness DJs. And then modern neuroscience has actually studied this, by the way. Like repetitive drumming at certain beats per second has been shown to encourage theta brainwave activity. It's that same state associated with deep meditation and REM sleep and, intuition and heightened suggestibility. So theta states are particularly important because they create increased neuroplasticity and access to the subconscious material. And this is why people often report visions and memories and emotional release or spiritual insight, or even just profound connectedness during rhythmic ceremonies. Like the brain becomes more flexible in trance states. And honestly, that explains a lot about why people like ritual felt so sacred to ancient people. Because from the inside, those altered states feel supernatural. So when that default mode network quiets down and ordinary consciousness softens, people experience timelessness and ego dissolution and interconnectedness and vivid imagery and mystical awe. Maybe even just heightened meaning perception. There is so much that is going on when all of this happens. And now, modern reductionists love to hear this and say, see, spiritual experiences are just brain chemistry. And I'm like, okay, and? Like everything you have ever experienced has involved brain chemistry. Love involves brain chemistry. Music involves brain chemistry. Grief involves brain chemistry. Like looking at the ocean at sunset while contemplating your existence involves brain chemistry. And that doesn't make those experiences less real. If anything, it suggests that the brain might actually be designed to interface with transcendent states. Like maybe the nervous system's not separate from spirituality. Maybe it's the vehicle for it. And this is where chanting becomes incredibly interesting. Like across cultures that had zero communication with each other, humans independently developed repetitive vocalization practices. Like you've got your Gregorian monks who chanted, and your Tibetan monks that also chanted, and your indigenous tribes also fucking chanting. Like your Hindus use mantras, and Sufis use repetitive prayer, and those ancient Egyptians use the sacred hymns. Nearly every spiritual tradition discovered that repetitive sound changes consciousness. That's not coincidence. Like, your chanting regulates your exhalation, which directly stimulates your vagus nerve, one of the primary communication highways between the brain and the body. Like longer exhalations activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which then slows your heart rate and promotes calmness. Humming and vocal vibration also create physical resonance within the chest and the throat and the skull, which may further stimulate vagal tone and relaxation responses. So in other words, prayer literally changes physiology. And then we have breath work, which honestly feels like one of the biggest examples of modern wellness culture rediscovering ancient technology and acting like it invented something revolutionary. Because controlled breathing alters blood chemistry. Rapid breathing can reduce carbon dioxide levels and induce tingling and dizziness and emotional release and altered awareness. Slow breathing can reduce stress hormones and regulate heart rate variability. Like certain breathing patterns create measurable changes in the autonomic nervous system within minutes. The ancient yogis knew this, the shamans knew this, the mystics knew this. Breath was never just breathing, it was a portal. And what fascinates me the most is that modern society unintentionally uses many of these same mechanisms constantly, just without the sacred awareness. Like concerts induce trance. Sporting events create collective synchronization. Military chants regulate fear responses. Like clubs use bass frequencies and rhythmic repetition to alter states. Even doomscrolling creates repetitive neurological loops that entrain attention and emotion. Like humans are always being conditioned by rhythm. The question is whether it's happening consciously or unconsciously, because ancient ritual wasn't random entertainment. It was an intentional state shifting. Like humans gathered together around firelight with drums and song and movement and shared emotion to regulate collectively. Ceremony synchronized people both biologically and emotionally, and heart rates aligned, and breathing aligned, and attention aligned, and the emotion aligned. And, honestly, I think this is part of why modern loneliness feels so brutal to the nervous system. Like, we evolved for communal regulation. Humans were never meant to process fear and grief and joy and awe and transformation entirely alone. Like, our ancestors entered these altered states together. They sang together, they mourned together, they danced together, they fasted together, and they dreamed together. Modern culture isolated the individual, and then we wonder why everybody is anxious. Because somewhere deep in your biology, your nervous system still remembers the drum. It remembers the firelight and the collective breath, and it remembers the ceremony, and it remembers what it feels like to synchronize with something so much larger than yourself. And maybe that's why certain sounds still move through the body like ancient memory, because maybe some part of you has heard them before. One of the most fascinating things about ancient spiritual practices is that so many of them involved removing stimulation instead of adding more. And honestly, that feels almost incomprehensible to the modern brain because we live in a culture that treats silence like a threat. Like the average person wakes up and immediately floods their nervous system with noise, like notifications and emails and caffeine and fluorescent lighting and traffic and social media and podcasts and group chats. It's all blue light and stress and doom scrolling and 27 fucking tabs open in the brain at all times. And modern humans are so overstimulated that many people genuinely cannot sit in a quiet room alone with their own thoughts without becoming deeply uncomfortable. And yet, across human history, nearly every initiatory tradition, they understood that isolation and fasting and silence and sensory deprivation could fundamentally alter consciousness, which raises a very interesting question. What happens when the nervous system finally stops being bombarded? Because ancient humans intentionally created environments where ordinary sensory input was reduced enough for the subconscious mind to then fully emerge. You've got your vision quests and your cave initiations, or your wilderness pilgrimages, or desert fasting and sweat lodges. You've got those created isolation chambers, like celibacy even, sleep deprivation, solitary prayer. This shit wasn't a punishment. It was actually technology, and modern neuroscience suggests that it was extraordinarily effective. One of the reasons sensory deprivation alters consciousness so dramatically is because the brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. Your brain is constantly processing incoming sensory data to construct what you experience as reality. But when the sensory input decreases significantly, the brain begins amplifying internal information instead. And this is why people in prolonged silence or darkness often begin to experience vivid imagery or heightened intuition, or even just, emotional release or altered time perception. The mind gets louder when the world gets quieter, and honestly, I think this is why modern people are terrified of stillness, because silence removes that distraction, and distraction is often what protects us from unresolved emotion. The nervous system will do almost anything to avoid pain that it doesn't feel safe enough to process. So instead, people stay busy and they overwork and overconsume or overscroll and overstimulate. Literally anything to avoid encountering the contents of their own fucking psyche. But ancient Ancient initiation traditions understood that healing and transformation often require confrontation with the self. Like, you had to enter the cave and cross the desert and sit in the darkness and fast from comfort long enough for a deeper consciousness to emerge. And then fasting itself is incredibly fascinating through both a biological and a spiritual lens. Like, today, fasting is usually marketed through productivity culture as biohacking, and it's for fat loss or mental clarity or inflammation reduction. Which, yes, biologically, fasting does influence metabolism and insulin sensitivity and cellular repair, but the body's process of cleaning out damaged cellular material does actually happen during this time. But also, historically, fasting was rarely just about physical health. It was about changing consciousness. Because when the body enters prolonged fasting states, several neurological shifts begin occurring, like levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's called BDNF. It all increases. And then BDNF supports neuroplasticity and learning and memory and resilience. Like, your ketone production rises, which many people experience as increased mental clarity and altered awareness. Dopamine pathways shift and attention sharpens and sensory perception often intensifies. And then from an evolutionary standpoint, this actually makes perfect sense because early humans who became mentally sharper during periods of food scarcity were more likely to survive. But spiritually, ancient cultures interpreted these altered states differently. Like, fasting was believed to thin the veil between the worlds, to increase spiritual receptivity, to purify perception, and to weaken the attachment to the material long enough for contact with something greater to emerge. So again, science and spirituality are not necessarily contradicting each other here. They might just be describing the same phenomenon, just through a different language. And then we have darkness itself, which honestly is one of the most overlooked altered state technologies in human history. Like, modern humans are profoundly disconnected from darkness. We live under artificial lighting constantly, but our ancestors did not. Like, for most of human existence, nighttime radically altered human perception. You had your firelight flickering and your shadows moving and your circadian rhythm shifting. Like, melatonin production increased naturally, not by the little fucking gummies that you take every night. Dream states were more integrated into waking consciousness. The boundary between imagination, intuition, sleep, and symbolic thinking was likely far more fluid than it is today because darkness changes neurochemistry. Like, extended darkness exposure increases your melatonin, and melatonin itself is chemically derived from serotonin. And some researchers have even explored possible links between deep meditative states and melatonin pathways and endogenous psychedelic compounds within the body, though much of this still remains theoretical. But it's still fascinating that nearly every mystical tradition placed enormous importance on darkness and caves and sleep temples. Like, ancient humans understood that consciousness itself changes in darkness. And honestly, it makes modern overstimulation feel even more biologically unnatural. Like, we're exposed to more information in one day than ancient humans probably processed in months. Like, the nervous system never fully powers down. Attention never fully resets. The subconscious rarely has uninterrupted space to speak, which may explain why so many people feel disconnected from intuition now. Like, intuition requires signal clarity, and signal clarity is difficult when your nervous system is drowning in noise. This is also why modern wellness trends are accidentally recreating ancient initiation practices without fully realizing it. Like silent retreats and dopamine detoxes and digital detoxes and cold plunges, even plant medicine ceremonies and long-distance hiking. Like, people are intuitively trying to regulate a nervous system that has become overloaded beyond its evolutionary capacity. And the wild part is that many people describe these experiences in the same way that ancient mystics did. It was like, I finally heard myself again, or I felt like just connected to something bigger, or I remembered who I was, or I felt alive for the first time in years. Because beneath all the stimulation, beneath the identity performance, beneath the productivity addiction and the algorithmic conditioning, the nervous system still remembers how to return to itself. Sometimes it just needs enough silence to hear it. At some point, humanity collectively decided that mystical experiences were either signs of mental instability or cute little spiritual delusions that belong exclusively to monks and shamans and people named River who own 17 crystals and smell like patchouli. And I'm not talking trash about patchouli because I almost exclusively wear it. But the deeper science digs into altered states of consciousness, the more uncomfortable modern materialism becomes. Because what researchers are discovering is that the human brain appears to be biologically capable of accessing states of awareness that radically transform perception and identity and emotion and even the sense of reality itself. And honestly, ancient humans would probably just shrug and go, yeah, babe, we already fucking know. Because for thousands of years, cultures all over the world intentionally used psychedelics and trance states and rhythmic ritual and sacred medicines to dissolve ordinary consciousness and access what they believed were spiritual dimensions and divine intelligence and ancestral communication or even fucking direct encounters with the cosmos itself. And what's fascinating is that modern neuroscience is finally able to observe some of what happens during these experiences in real time. And the findings are fucking wild. Like, one of the most important systems involved here is called the default mode network, the DMN. And the DMN is a network of interconnected brain regions heavily associated with self-referential thinking. So your sense of identity and your autobiographical memory and your internal narrative and your ego structure and that ongoing chatter of me. It's active when you think about yourself or you replay the past or you're predicting the future or you're worrying what people are thinking about you or even just mentally constructing your personal identity. And in many ways, the default mode network is the neurological architecture of the ego. And psychedelics do something incredibly interesting to it. So, studies on psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, and other psychedelics consistently show decreased activity and connectivity within the default mode network during those altered states. So essentially, those rigid boundaries of the self temporarily loosen. Like the brain becomes less compartmentalized and more globally interconnected. Like regions that don't normally communicate begin exchanging information freely. Like neural flexibility increases dramatically, which might explain why people on psychedelics often report experiences like feeling interconnected with all life and, profound compassion and mystical awe and ego disillusion and symbolic visions or spiritual downloads and basically just a loss of separation between the self and the universe. And now, from a purely scientific perspective, researchers might frame this as changes in perception and cognition and neuroconnectivity, but spiritually, ancient cultures interpreted this as communion. Not escapism, not hallucination, but communion. And I think modern culture gets very uncomfortable with that idea because it threatens the illusion that ordinary waking consciousness is the only valid way to perceive reality. But biologically speaking, human consciousness is already highly filtered. Like your brain is constantly deleting enormous amounts of sensory information every fucking second just so you can function. Like you're not perceiving objective reality in its entirety right now. You're perceiving a neurologically edited version of reality that your nervous system considers useful for survival, which means the question becomes incredibly interesting. Like, what if altered states don't create false realities? What if they temporarily just loosen the filter? And now listen, I'm not saying every psychedelic vision is literal cosmic truth. Like sometimes your brain is absolutely just doing weird shit. But I also think modern reductionism dismisses mystical experience way too quickly simply because it makes people uncomfortable. Because here's the thing. Mystical experiences consistently transform people. Like people often emerge with profound altered states with reduced fear of death or increased empathy or decreased depression or improved emotional processing. Like it's greater openness and increased feelings of interconnectedness and Neuroscience is beginning to validate this. Like, psychedelic-assisted therapy is showing extraordinary promise for treatment-resistant depression and PTSD and addiction and anxiety and trauma. And why? Well, it's because these substances temporarily disrupt the rigid neurological patterns. They create a window of neuroplasticity where entrenched emotional and cognitive loops can finally loosen, which honestly sounds suspiciously familiar to spiritual rebirth. Like ancient initiatory traditions, they often involve symbolic death and resurrection for a reason. Like the old identity had to dissolve before something new could emerge. And ego death wasn't viewed as pathology, it was transformation. And psychedelics were not the only route into these states. Like meditation can do this, and breathwork can do this, and unfortunately, near-death experiences can do this. Extreme fasting does this, drumming, deep prayer, and trauma can even do this unintentionally. Like humans are biologically capable of entering radically altered states through many pathways, which raises another fascinating possibility. Like maybe spirituality itself emerged from repeated human encounter with altered consciousness. And think about it. Like imagine early humans experiencing ego disillusion under the stars, or visions during fasting, and prophetic dreams in caves, and overwhelming interconnectedness during trance ceremonies. Maybe encounters with archetypal, imagery during plant medicine rituals. Like, look, of course these experiences would become embedded into myth and religion and cosmology and sacred tradition. Like, those states feel more real than ordinary reality to many people who experience them. And this is where modern science and ancient mysticism, they start circling each other in really interesting ways. Like quantum physics already tells us that reality is far stranger and less material effects than classical Newtonian models once assumed. Like observation affects outcomes. Matter behaves as probability until measured. Everything at a fundamental level exists as vibrating energy fields interacting within vast systems of relational information. And meanwhile, mystical traditions have been saying this shit for thousands of years. Everything is interconnected. Separation is illusion. Consciousness shapes experience, and reality is far stranger than it appears. Now, look, am I saying quantum mechanics proves spirituality? No. And people absolutely butcher quantum theory online in ways that makes physicists want to launch themselves into the sun. But what I am saying is that both modern physics and ancient mysticism increasingly suggest that reality is not nearly fixed or separate or straightforward as humans once believed. And maybe altered states matter because they temporarily interrupt the illusion of separateness long enough for humans just to remember that. Because underneath identity and underneath conditioning and underneath the nervous system armor, many people encounter the exact same realization. That they were never truly disconnected from the universe to begin with. I think one of the saddest things about modern humanity is that we are desperately starving for transcendence while simultaneously living in a culture that has stripped away almost every meaningful pathway to it. Like humans have always needed moments that interrupt ordinary consciousness, moments of awe and communion and mystery and grief and ecstasy and stillness and initiation. We need that collective emotion. We need that symbolic transformation. But modern life has become so fucking obsessed with productivity and logic and consumption and performance that we have lost most of the structures that once helped humans metabolize existence itself. And so when humans lose access to sacred states consciously, they often start seeking altered states unconsciously. And that's the part nobody tells you about. Because biologically and psychologically and spiritually, humans are not built to live entirely inside ordinary waking consciousness all the fucking time. Like, we crave relief from that rigid identity, relief from the stress, relief from the emotional suppression, relief from the endless looping mental narrative of the ego. Ancient cultures understood this and created those intentional rituals to guide people safely into expanded states of awareness. Modern society mostly replaced those rituals with consumerism. So now people chase transcendence through alcohol or doom scrolling or shopping or workaholism or chaotic relationships and binge watching and adrenaline addiction and pornography and substances and parasocial obsession or validation loops and constant fucking noise. And the wild thing is that many of these behaviors are still ritualistic. Like, think about it. Like, how many people come home every night and immediately perform the exact same nervous system soothing sequence without even realizing it? Like, you got your phone in hand and your TV on and your snacks and your alcohol and your endless scrolling. It's dissociation disguised as relaxation. Modern humans still ache for altered states. We just accidentally build industrialized versions that often dysregulate us further instead of restoring us. And look, I'm not saying that judgmentally because I think people are trying to survive nervous systems that are fucking overloaded beyond anything our ancestors evolved for. Like, the human brain is processing an absolutely inhuman amount of information now. News from every continent, artificial lighting at all hours, constant notifications, social comparison from thousands of people daily. It's algorithmic emotional manipulation. It's financial instability. It's productivity pressure. It's digital hypervigilance. Like, the nervous system never fully powers down. And without intentional rituals of restoration, humans start breaking psychologically, emotionally, spiritual, and even fucking physically. Which, look, honestly makes ancient ceremony look a lot less primitive and a lot more intelligent. Because your ancestors built lives around regulation, around cycles, around communal processing, around intentional pauses, around reverence, around emotional discharge, and around symbolic meaning. Like, there were designated times to grieve and times to celebrate and times to fast and rest and gather and release and dream and times to reconnect with mystery. Modern culture flattened almost all of that into go to work and answer emails until you die. And I genuinely think part of that collective anxiety epidemic is that the nervous system is screaming for rhythm while modern society demands constant output instead. Because rhythm regulates biology. Like, even your body is built on cycles. It's got heartbeats and breathing and sleep cycles and hormonal cycles and circadian rhythms and seasonal shifts and your brainwave oscillations. Nature itself moves rhythmically, but modern science increasingly disconnects humans from those natural oscillations. Like, we eat at unnatural times. We sleep under artificial light. We ignore seasonal transitions. We override exhaustion with caffeine and we numb emotion with distraction. We push through burnout like it's a fucking personality trait. And then we wonder why everybody feels empty. And meanwhile, the nervous system is basically sitting in a corner like, bestie, I was built for moonlight and storytelling around fires and communal singing and grief rituals and sunlight exposure and movement and rest and occasional transcendental experiences under the stars. And you know what? Honestly, same. But this is where I think things get hopeful, because humans are already beginning to remember, and you can see it everywhere right now. Like, people are returning to meditation and breathwork and cold plunges and sound healing and yoga and forest bathing and plant medicine ceremonies. Like, we are returning to nervous system regulation practices and digital detoxes. And sure, sometimes modern wellness culture can get a little ridiculous. Like, if I see one more wealthy influencer charging $600 for a quantum goddess code vortex activation with a cacao ceremony, I am going to project myself directly into the fucking sun. But beneath the commercialization, something real is happening. People are intuitively trying to repair their relationship with consciousness itself. They're trying to remember how to feel connected again, connected to themselves and connected to each other and connected to nature and connected to spirit and, you know what, just connected to meaning. Because deep down, I think many humans can feel that something essential was lost when ritual disappeared from ordinary life. And not religion necessarily, and not dogma, but ritual. Those intentional moments where the nervous system exists, just long enough to reconnect with awe. And Maybe that's ultimately why ceremony matters, and it's not because it's trendy or aesthetic or makes you spiritually superior, but because human beings require experiences that remind us that we are more than productivity machines trapped inside collapsing attention spans. We need the stillness. Like, we need the reverence. We need symbolic transformation. We need the collective emotion. We need the mystery and the beauty and the moments where ego softens long enough for the soul to breathe again. And your ancestors understood that. They knew that humans needed songs. They needed fire. They needed silence and plants and stories and ceremony. And maybe the real evolution of humanity isn't becoming more technological. Maybe it's just learning how to merge modern science with ancient wisdom so that we can finally remember what it means to be fully human again. You have been listening to the Synaptic Soul podcast, where science meets spirit and they totally make out. If this episode hit your frequency, do me a favor, rate it, review it, and share it with your fellow quantum weirdos. It helps the wavelength reach more souls. And if you caught a little snoring, that wasn't a portal, just my Frenchies Rocky and Rambo offering background blessings. Music is Cheat Code by 1,000 Hands, used under Creative Commons. And I am Ava Marie Anderson. Stay weird, stay wired, and keep making out with your higher self.